Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rao's IAS Study Circle to get relevant material and important updates. Hello everyone and welcome to Sunday edition of Daily News Simplified, where we discuss the science in tech and frequently asked questions from the previous Sunday edition of the Hindu newspaper and the explained section of the past 1 week of the Indian Express. Articles which are put up for today's discussion are listed on your screen, and the timestamping for these articles is already given in the description box. So let us begin with the first article for the day. Now, going by the daily exercise of mapping questions from the UPSC Civil Service Examination prelims this year. Today we are going to discuss the question 64 and how this question could have been solved if you would have solved the question from the Rao's IAS prelim test series, and also shows the approach that Rao's IAS follow in its prelim test series. The question 64 asks about the black cotton soil of India which have been formed due to the weathering of which of the following type of rocks. The answer to this question was fissure volcanic rock. Now, if you go through the question which was given in Rao's IAS Prelim Test Series 21 General Studies Theme Test on Geography, you will find that the very first statement of question 31 of this Prelim Test Series actually talked about the composition of these rocks from the lava flows. If we go through the explanation which we have provided in the test series, the explanation itself says that it is the volcanic in origin and is composed of lava flows. Hence, it is covered with black soil. The entire explanation shows us the fact that Western India and Central West India compose the black soil, which is used for the cotton cultivation since ages because it is high in the composition of clay. So this question mapping has clearly shows us that the kind of quality of prelim test series produced at Rao's IAS and this test series also meet the basic and the most comprehensive demand of the UPSC examination. With this, now we start with our today's Daily News Simplified discussion. So, this article is part of Science and Technology and frequently asked questions from the Hindu newspaper. This article explicitly deals with the recent controversy which became headlines to many newspapers regarding the complaint which was made by the French manufacturer about a rice flour. This rice was actually imported by France from India. And the allegation was that the rice which they imported had genetically modified components. And this became a controversy because European Union does not allow or does not import, it does not permit any use of genetically modified rice in the continent. And this is one of the reasons why they have made this complaint to Indian authorities. On the other hand, India has said that India does not allow any commercial cultivation of GM rice either. It simply means that India as of now is supporting its view on the fact that there is no food crop which is genetically modified in the country, either produced or exported. Now, the importance of this article from the UPSC perspective comes from the fact that UPSC has asked questions from the genetically modified crops multiple times in the prelim examination. Even in the mains examination, GM crops is important for your science and technology and India's scientific contribution to the different fields of science and technology. So the content for this article would include what is a GM crop, the GM crop which India has used, how a crop is manufactured as a GM crop, and some other prelims related pointers which are extremely helpful for the preparation of this examination. So let us look into the past trend of UPSC. Well, in 2018, UPSC has asked questions on genetically modified mustard. In 2012, they have asked questions on BT brinjal, which is also a type of GM crop. So, from these two boxes, it is clear that GM is extremely important not only for your prelim examination, but as a topic in general. So, let us start with explaining how a GM crop is created. Well, GM is nothing but genetically modified crop. It means we are going to modify the genes. Genetic means genes of a particular crop. Well, we will not venture into the genetic profile of a particular organism or any crop. We will look into how GM crop is created. So the first purpose is to identify why we need to create a GM crop. For instance, we have BT cotton. Why we created BT cotton? To make it pest resistance. So we have to have a purpose that what kind of traits or what kind of quality we need to bring into a particular crop. So first of all, we will identify a trait which we need to borrow. Then we will look into a particular plant and their environment. For instance, if we want to create BT cotton, we will look into those plants or microorganisms from which we can take that trait which can help us to create BT cotton which is pest resistance. Then in the second step, we will isolate the genetic trait of that interest. For instance, let's say there are two crops, crop A and crop B. Crop A is, let's say, pest resistance. Crop B is not. So what we will do? We will take all those genes in crop A which creates pest resistance qualities and we will put that gene into crop B. Now the output of crop B will be pest resistance. So what we will do? We will have comparative analysis of the genomes to identify the trait, and in this case we will go for the genome analysis of crop A and we will find out that particular gene, let's say the particular gene is gene X, and we will keep that gene aside. We will insert that particular trait or particular gene into other crop, and this process will be done through incorporating the gene into the seed of the other plant. This is done through the genetic trait and it is cut down and pasted into the plasmid using enzymes. Then we have a gene gun which shoots the DNA coated metal particles into the seed. It simply means that the new gene which we have taken from the other crop is now been inserted into the new crop. After that, the plasmid inserted into the bacteria and then infects the other cells as well. And after that, we have a new seed with the different traits or different qualities altogether. So let me revise this entire process once again. First of all, we will identify a particular quality from the other plant which we need to incorporate into our own plant. Then we identify all those traits and qualities and try to separate those qualities from the source plant. Then we will put all those qualities using the DNA technology, using the recombinant DNA technology into the destination plant. Then finally we will have a new seed and we will grow that new seed to get the new quality. Now after this entire process, let me show you this with the example. GM crops or GM food crops are derived from the plants whose genes are artificially modified, usually by inserting the genes material from another organism. So as we have discussed the example of plant A and plant B, so we are using the genes from one crop to the other crop in order to give new property, like we take the example of pest resistance. The purpose could be to increase the yield, to increase the tolerance to the herbicide, or many other purposes like tolerance to the disease, droughts, or even increase the nutritional value. Here we have the best example of golden rice, which was created to increase the nutritional value of existing rice. Now, how we have done that? We have incorporated or we have inserted a gene from the other plant, and the other plant was daffodil and maize. And along with these two plants, we have also incorporated a soil bacterium. So we have used all the genes from these three sources and we have incorporated into the genes of rice. What was the result? Well, we have a rice which is extremely helpful to increase the vitamin A consumption in the human. And this is the reason why we could ensure the nutritional security to the population. This is the best example to show how genetically modified crops can help the humanity as a whole. The status of GM crops in India shows that as of now, that is October 2021, there is only one genetically modified crop which is used in India, and this is the BT cotton. Apart from this, India does not have any other crop which is genetically modified. And for your information, there is no food genetically modified crop in the country. India is using GM crop of cotton to such an extent that now 95% of the cotton area in India is using BT cotton cultivation, and this is one of the reasons why India has seen a kind of revolution in cotton production. As we have discussed, there is no GM crop ever produced, approved or consumed in India, and as of now only there are 20 genetically modified crops which have been taken up, but only for the field trial and not for the final consumption. Now we come to the important prelim pointers. I would put 3 star to these points. You should remember all these points by heart. Let us start with the BT cotton first. Well, BT cotton was created as a pest resistant crop, and this pest resistant is given against the bollworm insect. Bollworms are of 3 types. First is pink, American and spotted. This BT cotton was developed to raise the productivity by Monsanto Biotech Limited. It is a private company and not an Indian one. Now the confusion rises that what was the purpose, whether it was a pest resistant or the purpose of raising productivity. Well, when you protect a crop from the pest or the attack of the pest, you actually save the destruction of a particular crop. And this is the reason why you actually end up raising the productivity. So from pest resistant to the rise in the productivity is the actual objective of creating BT cotton. Now the question arises is what is BT? Well, BT stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. It is nothing but it is a kind of bacteria which is taken from soil. This bacteria actually produces a toxin, and this toxin is known as crystal protein. Now this protein which is produced in the cotton plant actually kills the pest when pests attack the plant and try to consume it. Now as we have seen, this crystal protein is produced by the BT gene in the cotton plant using a vector carrier, and this entire process is known as recombinant DNA technology. Recombinant is nothing but a simple English term which says combining together. If you go to the last line of this slide, recombinant technology is nothing but shows when two genes of two or more different species are combined. See, this is the word combined. It shows the background of the recombinant term. And this is done to achieve a desired result. Alright, so recombinant DNA technology is what we use to produce genetically modified crops. Ministry of Corporate Affairs. See, this is a punchline. Ministry of Corporate Affairs and not FSSAI or the Ministry of Rural Development or the Ministry of Agriculture. It is the Ministry of Corporate Affairs which has made it compulsory to notify the labeling of GM crops over a product. So if you are buying a particular cotton seed or maybe a particular cotton flower from a field or from a farmer, then you should label it whether it is genetically modified or not. As of now, we have three varieties of BT cotton, variety 1 and variety 2 and variety 3. As of now, variety 1 and 2 is allowed in India. On the other hand, the third variety is not allowed in India at all. The third variety of BT cotton is the herbicide tolerant, also known by the term HT-BT cotton. And this was a controversy which arose 2 years back when some of the farmers died on the field. The third variety of BT cotton is very much famous in the farmer community for the reason being that it is tolerant to glyphosate herbicide. So all these points are extremely important for your prelims examination, so revise them regularly. With this discussion in place, now I will leave you with the important question to attempt. So read this question carefully. This would be your question number 1 and answer in the comment box. With this, now we will move to the next article for the day. Now, if you're reading the newspaper these days, you will come across the important article that Kerala and Uttarakhand frequently are facing the curse of floods. These floods have caused the landslides, loss of life and property, and of course the loss of agricultural field important to millions of poor farmers. The reason for these kind of events in these ecologically sensitive area is the climate change. And that is what is going to be the crux of this article, which was published on 24th of October 2021 in the Hindu newspaper frequently asked section. This article explicitly explained to us, which we can also find in the NCERT of Geography, that due to the change in pressure, temperature of the ocean bodies across the world or the water bodies across the world, what we are observing is that there is a climate change, and this climate change is propelling changes in the weather and precipitation patterns across the globe. And India, being one of the most developed nation as far as monsoon is concerned, is one of the most important victim of this impact of climate change in the precipitation patterns. The context of the article says that in the last few years, there have been variation in the pattern and intensity of rainfall in states such as Kerala and Uttarakhand. The relevance of this article is straightforward, as it is important for your prelims under Geography of India and means it is important under the General Studies paper 1 under the category of geophysical phenomena, in which we have the topic of cyclones. The content for today's article would be that what explain the torrential rain in Kerala and Uttarakhand, how it is related to the global warming, and how the society's environmental choices is leading towards is creating the issues of natural disaster. So let us start with what explains the torrential rain in Kerala and Uttarakhand. Well, we all know that monsoon cycle is prone to macro as well as the micro changes. At macro scale, we have the issues of La Nina and El Nino. We also have the issues of Madden-Julian oscillation or Indian Ocean dipole. However, with the change of time and the rise of climate change, we are observing the changes in the extreme climate events. And these extreme climate events include the regional changes of the climatic and the weather patterns, which actually shows the warming up of Arabian Sea. This also depends on the changing weather patterns in the Mediterranean Sea. Now, how this happened? Let us see. Take the case of Kerala. Kerala is a state which is tropical in nature and is surrounded by the Arabian Sea in the west. And on east, it has border with Tamil Nadu, which is a state bordering the Bay of Bengal. Hence, given the kind of location Kerala has, it is bound to have rain-bearing clouds all across the year. But the low pressure which is being generated in the Arabian Sea due to high temperature is now contributing to the heavy rainfall. Now, when there is a high temperature and when there is low pressure, what we see? We see the development of cyclonic pattern in that particular area, and the state of Kerala, which has elements of hilly areas, is bound to have conventional as well as orographic rainfall. On the other hand, in Uttarakhand, what we are observing is the development of strong western disturbances. The western disturbances is a phenomena which occurs in the western hemisphere of the earth, and in this hemisphere there is a place with the name Mediterranean Sea. The changing of pressure and temperature in the Mediterranean Sea creates clouds, and these clouds travel all the way to the Himalayas, and one branch of this cloud enter the Indian subcontinent. This moisture-laden cloud creates rainfall in the months of winters. However, weakening of pressure in the Bay of Bengal due to excessive warming is creating more low pressure. Higher low pressure will attract rainfall-laden moisture from western disturbances towards the Bay of Bengal, which will create the rainfall pattern in the Uttarakhand. So, more heating of Bay of Bengal will create rainfall in the Uttarakhand, and more heating of Arabian Sea will create rainfall in the Kerala. So, climate change ultimately causes havoc in these two states, which we are observing in the past 2-3 years. Now, the question is how this phenomena is related to the global warming. Well, the month of October, if you go through the NCERT, is related to the removal of the southwest monsoon and the arrival of northeast monsoon in India. This northeast monsoon, after passing through the Bay of Bengal, provide rainfall to the states like Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh and Kerala, and Union Territory of Puducherry. As the climate is warming up due to the global warming and greenhouse gases, it is leading to the rise in the temperature of Arabian Sea, which ultimately creates the low pressure. As we have the combination of high temperature, low pressure, and low temperature, high pressure. So this phenomena is building up in the Arabian Sea. On the other hand, Bay of Bengal, which was historically warmer ocean than the Arabian Sea, is now receding. It doesn't mean that Bay of Bengal is becoming more cool. It simply means that Arabian Sea comparatively is becoming more warmer. And this has created significant cyclonic activity in the past 3-4 years. On the other hand, the global warming leading to the warmer Arctic Ocean has also increased the pressure on the western disturbances and strengthened their composition of moisture. The colder air which is coming from the Arctic Ocean has increased the moisture of western disturbances, and as we know, more moisture means more precipitation, including rainfall and snowfall in the northern part of India. Now, when it comes to the anthropogenic or human created activities, well, in the states like Kerala and Uttarakhand, and not limited to these states, we also have states like Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh and northeast states. What we are seeing is high cases of landslips or landslide. Now, the reason basically being the construction activity and excessive expansion of the human habitation. We also have the issues of dam construction in ecologically sensitive zones. We have the issue of roads and highways in those eco-sensitive areas which should not be touched upon in order to prevent the landslides. With the past experience, it can easily be deduced that more human activities in these areas or ecologically sensitive zones will create more havoc in the loss of men, money, and property, and would eventually create greater and greater climate risk to each and every person or even flora and fauna situated in these areas. So the matter of concern is that in order to fight these kind of concerns, we have to go for adaptation and mitigation efforts to control the emission of greenhouse gases and ultimately control the climate change. With this discussion in place, now I will leave you with this important practice MCQ. So read this question carefully and answer in the comment box. This article of Indian Express was published on 25th of October and deals with the environmental and international ecology concern under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Well, this convention has a separate body known by the name Conference of Parties, and since 2015 these Conference of Parties have been dealing under the Paris deal to come to a consensus where all the countries can frame a deal and its handbook to provide finances and technology to those countries which are fighting the climate change. The relevance of this article is important both for your prelims and mains perspective from environment and ecology. The context of the article deals with the recent talks or the annual summit of UNFCCC, which is being held at Glasgow in United Kingdom. The content for this article would be the agenda for this year's global climate talk, which is going to be held at Glasgow. As far as COP26 or Conference of Party 26 meeting is concerned, every aspect of this meeting has already been discussed in the Daily News Simplified dated 21st of October 2021. So, the leftover part, that is the agenda for COP26, would be discussed here in brief. So, the agenda for Conference of Parties 26 is as follows. The first agenda is to secure global net zero by mid-century and keep 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature within reach. This 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature is considered from the advent of Industrial Revolution in 18th century. The net zero and the concept of net zero has already been discussed in DNS multiple times. So, under these two categories, many nations, including the United Kingdom and the European nations, have committed to bring down their emissions by 78%. India, on the other hand, has not pledged any net zero emission. However, India is committed to bring about 450 gigawatts of renewable energy. So, net zero was the first agenda for this Conference of Party 26. The second agenda was to protect the communities and natural habitat which are vulnerable to the climate change. The community here mostly includes those countries which are prone to floods, famines and droughts, which is the consequence of extreme climate change. Most importantly being the island nations, especially in Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. The third agenda for this meeting is going to be to mobilize the finance. As per the Paris deal, developed nations are required to provide $100 billion of investment and funds every year to fight the climate change. However, till now, not even the 50% of this fund have been collected. And this is the another matter of concern at a global climate change talks. And the last agenda for this COP is going to be to work together to finalize the Paris Rulebook. Well, Rulebook is a separate document, and this document deals with the kind of commitments that each country is going to make in order to fight the climate change. The commitment of countries is based on the national determined contribution and based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. It simply means that each country will contribute to fight climate change based on the capacity it has. So, given all these four agendas, you should have basic ideas about all these 4 points which can or could be asked in the upcoming mains examination or the mains examination for the next year. With this discussion in place, we will move to the next article for the day. This article was published in the explained section of the Indian Express on 30th of October, that is yesterday, and deals with the important aspect of gambling in the Indian society. Well, the context of the article says that there was an FIR which was registered in the state of Karnataka, and the background of this FIR was the recently amended act of gambling in the state of Karnataka. Well, state of Karnataka has actually completely banned the concept of gambling in the state. And to the surprise, they have also included the online fantasy sport games like Dream 11. The brand you're probably known by those annoying 10-second ad on the YouTube. In order to reduce this activity in the state of Karnataka, the government of the same state has taken this following initiative. Now, from the UPSC perspective, it is not important for us to get into the high intensive legal aspect or the crime related aspect behind the gambling. From the UPSC perspective, gambling could be a part of your ethics paper. That is, we will look into ethics and morality of the gambling. Gambling or its ban could also be asked in the essay paper of the UPSC. And we can also link the aspect of gambling and its ban through the concept of good governance. So the content for this article would be, we will look into all about the amendment which was taken up. We will also look into the ethical aspect of the gambling, and we will also look into the debate that should gambling be legalized in India or not. As far as amendment is concerned, Karnataka government has not only banned the physical form of gambling but also the online form. And because of this, most of the online betting or online gaming app or gambling app has now created a geotech log. It means they have now supported the geofencing of their apps. It simply means that if you are having any application like Dream 11 and you are moving from the state of Karnataka, you will not be able to use it across the state. But when you cross Karnataka, you will again get access to these applications and you will have all the access to the game. So because of this ban, these companies have started the geofencing on the application. And this is one of a kind example of geofencing of a particular application based on the law which a state is following in India. As far as ethical aspect of the gambling is concerned, well, these are the following ethical aspects which we can derive. You can also derive other ethical aspect based on your understanding. Well, if we go through the gambling aspect through the ethical lenses, we'll find that gambling is based on hedonism. Now, what is hedonism? Hedonism is an ideology which focuses on achieving the greater desire, greater pleasure in life. So, a person who is looking for pleasure, mostly the physical pleasure in his life, for instance, the happiness, for instance, roaming, for instance, touring around the world, getting more money, and all those materialistic things, that person is following the ideology of hedonism. That is, finding pleasure through the materialistic world. Gambling is also based on the concept of consequentialism. It means the person who is involved or the person who is getting into the aspect of gambling is looking for the consequences. His ideology, his functioning, his behavior and attitude is based on the consequence of a particular event. They are looking towards winning or losing. They are not looking into the process. They are not looking into how the game is going to be. They are not going into the process. They are not looking into the duty of what they are doing. They are just looking into the consequence. What is going to be the consequence? Either they are going to win or they are going to lose. So they are basically following the concept of consequentialism. Gambling is definitely based on the desires and the greed. More is the greed, more is the involvement of a person in the gambling process. It is based on the individualistic nature. Individualistic nature means when a person involves himself, herself in the gambling or the games involved in the gambling, they are looking for their own benefit. Not for the benefit of their family, not for the benefit of the society or for the polity or a nation as a whole. That person just want to get into the betting process just to get their own needs met. Gambling is a moral relative, but also the ethical absolute. Now, what does it mean? It means when it comes to good or bad aspect of gambling, it may differ from person to person. So when it comes to the morality of gambling, it may be different for different people altogether. So one person in the same society may say gambling is good. Other person in the same society may say it is bad. But when it comes to the ethical aspect of the entire society, entire nation or entire world, it is absolutely a negative concept. So as a whole, as a entire global society, we will say that gambling is a unethical thing. Similarly, if you take the example of, let's say, United States. In United States, you can find people playing the legal gambling. There's a city with the name Las Vegas, which is known for gambling and betting. So in that society, you'll find that people are finding it to be moral to play a gambling. On the other hand, there are countries like India where people find it to be wrong. So it is a moral relative but a ethical absolute. It also promotes an attitude, because attitude is also part of your syllabus in the ethics paper. So what kind of attitude does it promote? It promotes risk taking attitude of a person. But higher risk involves higher possibility or probability of failure. And this failure probability can lead a person to a social ostracization. It can also lead to the political and the legal hurdle in the life of a person. Apart from this, gambling is also one of the most controversial leisure activity in the world. There are cities like, as I said, Las Vegas, there are cities like Monaco, which are known to have these controversial leisure activity. And lastly, gambling promotes the passive behavior on human effort, because behavior is also part of your ethics syllabus. So what kind of behavior does gambling supports? It supports the passive behavior, that you want to earn more without working hard. All right, so let us look into, should gambling be legalized in India or not? So first of all, we will look into the yes concept, that yes, gambling should be legalized. Now the reason for this would be that it can curb the black money and terrorist financing in nation like India. It will also support, or it will also get the wider social support. So once you legalize, there are hundreds and thousands of people who are involved in the gambling activities but are afraid to come public, and they will get the support from the politics, from the legal aspect. So they will be eager to have participation in the gambling process. We also have many examples of nations like European nations, like United States, Australia, where we find that legal betting is allowed. It is also a way of generating the employment. For instance, there were times when betting on a particular agriculture commodity or going for artificially changing the prices of agriculture commodity was considered illegal or was considered unethical. But now we have options, futures, and other derivatives for the agriculture produce. So it created a kind of employment opportunities. The moment we legalize the betting or gambling in the country, we will have bars, we will have different hotels and other hospitality business which will cater the needs of gambling or people who want to be involved in the gambling. And ultimately, when it is legalized, the people who are involved in the gambling will pay taxes to the government. However, there are certain people in the society, and in fact the government in multiple states thinks that gambling is no good. Why? Because it spoils the integrity of the society. It affects the common man, because ultimately the desire, the greed, the power to take risk will trickle down to the common man. And when common man start involving herself into the gambling process, it will destabilize the economic security of a family. It also promotes the anti-social elements. As you can go through the data, that crime in those cities of the United States is very high where legal gambling is allowed. It will also promote hawala and the black money. Government cannot guarantee that each money which is spent in the gambling process could be converted into the organized money or the white money. For instance, there are many ways through which stock market or money involved in the stock market could be round-tripped. So, despite having the legal measures for the stock market, still black money goes into the stock market. It is not a guarantee that legalizing the gambling will reduce the black money at a universal rate. And finally, gambling promotes the organized crimes. Like, it promotes the hawala activities, it promotes round tripping, it also promotes those underworld activities in the metro cities. So given both these criteria, now the question arises, what should we do? First of all, there's a requirement of macro level debate. We require all the stakeholders to come together and have a debate, considering both ethical as well as socio-economic condition of India before legalizing gambling. Law Commission of India has recommended to legalize these kind of activities on the pretext of two reasons. First, it generates revenues for the government, which as of now government is losing out. And secondly, government have been very unsuccessful in order to control the gambling activity which have been taken place in an illegal form. So given these two criteria, Law Commission has suggested to go for legalizing these betting or gambling activities in India. Now what will happen in the future just depends on what would be the criteria taken by different states in India, because law and order is a matter of states under the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So what will happen in the future depends on the time to come. Now we come to the end of today's Daily News Simplified Sunday edition, and I leave you with question of the day.